Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. If you'd have told me at the start of September 2023 that by the end of the month I would be playing a brand new James Bond video game, I would likely have responded,
There's a useful four-letter word, and you're full of it.
And yet, on the 29th of September 2023, Cipher 007 was released on Apple Arcade, a top-down action-adventure game where the players control James Bond through some familiar settings and scenarios from the film series history. Despite new James Bond game existing towards the top of my most wanted things in Bond list for some years, I do have to admit to having kept my expectations in check somewhat when it came to approaching Cipher. This is not a AAA release. This is not the hugely anticipated IO Interactive game. This is a free-to-play app game, and yes, that comes with some built-in caveats as to what you're going to get. But hey, Cipher is the first Bond game we've received in more than a decade. Yeah, I'm not counting that, and I have to admit that I was very intrigued by the trailers and promo material. This is not a standard James Bond story, and I was interested to see how the returning villains and story elements were going to be utilised. It seemed like it was taking a leaf out of the books of GoldenEye, Rogue Agent, and 007 Legends in repurposing these older James Bond elements. Though, admittedly, those two games are probably not the most flattering of comps, but you get what I mean when it comes to the idea of mashing up older Bond characters and elements into a new story. So I got myself all signed up with the free trial Apple Arcade and hopped straight into Cipher. The game begins with a gun barrel sequence, which interestingly seems to be a rotoscoped version of the Quantum of Solace barrel, but anyway, we get the title and then it's straight into Bond's mission in a prologue level. This is very much a tutorial in order to get the player used to some of the gameplay mechanics and controls, and indeed, this being Apple Arcade, there are numerous ways to play, my own playthrough being on my Mac desktop with a PS4 controller. Obviously, you can play the game on your iPhone or iPad as well, and I suspect that this is how most casual players will be experiencing the game. I gave it a little spin on the iPhone myself, and I thought it played quite well, to be honest, a lot better than I was expecting it would, but this is a Bond game and I want to give it the big screen treatment, and playing it with a PlayStation controller is my preferred method of gaming. The story begins in the Swiss Alps. Moneypenny is on the comms informing you that Blofeld is up to no good, and you need to find out what before it's too late. As I say, this level introduces you to a whole bunch of the game's mechanics, including how to stealthily take down enemies by crouching and attacking them from behind, and how to dodge firepower with a forward roll. There are various objectives to take care of before the level ends, but quite abruptly, with James Bond gassed unconscious just as a cat-stroking, bald-headed Blofeld appears, and from this point on, the story goes in a very interesting direction. The game is divided into chapters from this point on, and Chapter 1 sees Bond wake up in his own apartment. He has no idea how he got there. He still has a comms link to Moneypenny, but she's saying that there's no time to explain and he needs to get out right now as Alec Trevelyan appears with some goons looking to arrest Bond for treason. Bond is fortunately equipped with a flashbang gadget to daze the villains and escape. As for where the flashbang comes from, well, let's just hope that it's a Q-branch belt and nothing else that Bond would have to be carrying around next to his crotch. From this point on, Chapter 1 follows Bond making his way through a variety of environments in order to get to the MI6 building and meet with Moneypenny, Q, and M to get an explanation as to what the hell is going on. It'll take 10 levels to get there though, and I must say that I had a really great time playing through this chunk of the game. While not based on any particular Bond film, this is a very, it's Skyfall and Spectre iconography heavy, and Bond's flat is clearly modelled on how it looked in Spectre. You're travelling through the London Underground like in Skyfall, and you move through several environments in MI6 lifted from that film, like Silver's containment room. Q's labs look just like they did in Spectre and Skyfall, and I must say that the level of detail is really rewarding for a Bond fan. The Q branch level in particular is a whole load of fun. There are a bunch of things in the lab, from the Lotus Esprit to the jetpack to the Q boat, that really put a smile on my face, and indeed I think that this whole game looks really quite impressive. I mean, this is a top-down action game. There's not much scope to moving the camera around. It remains relatively fixed throughout, but I didn't mind that at all. I didn't find it hindering my gameplay at all. Mission objectives often revolve around finding key cards to get through certain doors, restoring power to unlock doors to the next area, and taking down Spectre agents. Cipher is not a shoot-'em-up, rather stealthy takedowns are rewarded, and indeed there does seem to have been a conscious attempt at softening the kinds of violence you can get up to as James Bond in this game. You do in fact have weapons, and while they might look like firearms, firearms, they're actually described as non-lethal. The P62 is the weapon that you begin with, and while it operates in much the same way as a regular gun would in any other shooting game, you point it at bad guys, fire it, and then their health depletes until they drop to the floor and disappear, but we're actually to believe here that they are just being put to sleep by the weapons, as is evident by a bunch of Z's that appear above characters when they're defeated, which can be kind of hilarious when it's in a situation like this and there's all these assault rifles and people are dropping to the floor. It's like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, they're just sleeping. Combining this with the fact that there's no blood at the gun barrel, when the 007 logo appears, it doesn't have the gun silhouette attached to it. I assume that there are rules and regulations at play, like if you had actual guns and actual killing in this game, maybe it would be rated 15 plus, or maybe there are just Apple Arcade rules and regulations about, actually killing people in the games. I don't know exactly what it is, but they clearly want this game to be as accessible to as many players as possible, and for what Cipher is, I can't say that I have any real problem with that. I had major flashbacks to whole other eras of Bond games when I was playing this, most specifically, though, the GBA version of Everything or Nothing, which had a similar top-down view, and I think that just the overall pick-up and play element that game had, Cipher has too. The average par playing time for these levels is around 10 minutes apiece, which is just the right amount for me, personally, for a bit of casual gameplay. I can just blast my way through a couple of levels to past 20 minutes or so, and then put it down and come back the next day. I suppose it's the overall simplicity of the gameplay too. I mean, the game shows you the viewing range of enemies. Like, so long as you stay out of those zones, you won't be seen. If they hear noises, they'll break from their routes to investigate, and there are places where you can turn on the radio, for instance, to lure them to a certain spot before you strike, and then you have some gadgets that you can throw, and that'll attract their attention. It's simplistic, of course, but I had a great time with some of the stealthier elements of the game, actually, which is quite unusual for me. I am normally an all-guns-blazing kind of player, but I never found the reliance on stealth techniques in Cipher hindered my fun at all. There is quite a bit of repetition here, there is an awful lot of just finding a keycard to open a door, restoring power to get through a door, that kind of thing, and, there aren't that many ways of taking out enemies, and yet, the danger with these kinds of very, heavy, repeatable elements is that it would get boring, and I'm pleased to say that I did not feel bored at all during my playthrough of this game. There are collectibles to find on each level too, there's intel documents and components which can be used to upgrade weapons and gadgets as well as contribute towards your gameplay total. Each level ends with the option to choose from a selection of rewards depending on your final score, which is cool and certainly contributes towards the replay factor of the game, but more on that later. Chapter 1 of the game culminates with a boss battle with Alec on the rooftop of the MI6 building. It's simple stuff, you just need to destroy the 2 pillars supporting his platform and then engage him in combat to, well, I was going to say defeat him, but put him to sleep. After doing so, M appears and Chapter 1 ends with the MI6 trio assembled to lay out what the premise of the story here really is. So in the prologue where Bond was gassed, he was captured by Spectre, and in reality, he has been brainwashed into being an agent of theirs. However, thanks to Bond's training, he has essentially created, stay with me here, he has created a mental landscape in his own mind that his real personality is existing in, while the Spectre-conditioned, brainwashed side of Bond has control of his real-life body. I guess it sounds kind of complicated when you try to say it out loud like that, but with this I was really taken back to Ian Fleming's The Man with the Golden Gun, another story involving Bond being brainwashed, and it's cool to see that concept explored elsewhere. M, Q, and Moneypenny are conjured up as, well, imaginary friends, as Bond himself puts it, and M is the one to lay out exactly how Bond is to escape Spectre's mind trap and restore himself to normality. To do so, he needs to revisit his former missions, enemies from the past, in order to defeat them and rediscover who he really is through his memories. This is the story vehicle through which Bond will be able to revisit these past adventures, and while it takes a whole lot more explaining than the 007 Legends approach of just, well, Bond hallucinates while drowning, it is a far more intriguing premise, I think, and it opens up a lot of possibilities regarding where the story will go. And where it goes immediately is to You Only Live Twice, with the game's Chapter 2, again comprised of 10 levels loosely based around the 5th 007 film. Now, as much as I really enjoyed Chapter 1 of this game, when it comes to Chapter 2, I absolutely adored it. From exploring the volcano base, to freeing the captured astronauts, to being flanked by a team of ninjas on the assault, to firing jets of fire at pursuing helicopters from Little Nelly. If the rest of this game is gonna be this kind of reimagining for other Bond films in the series, then sign me up. I had such a great time playing through this whole section. The Little Nelly level in particular is just an absolute blast. I can't believe that Nelly has never appeared as a playable vehicle in a Bond game before, or at least certainly not one that I've played, but this little level is just so much fun. The machine guns, the flamethrowers, the rockets, the missiles are all here. It has the classic look. This level in particular was such a delight for me, and I think it will be for many a Bond fan. Jaws appears in one level as a sort of mini boss, and it's cool to see the character here, and boy, did I have everything or nothing flashbacks during this fight. You have to basically like lure Jaws over to explosives and electronics in order to stun him before you can attack, just like in that final Brosnan era Bond game. I think the game does a really good job of seamlessly blending elements from all these different Bond eras, like particularly considering that the Craig films sit aside in terms of continuity from the 20 films that came prior to it. I love that Cipher is blending, like, you know, Connery locations with Craig locations, with gadgets from the Moore era, with villains from the Pierce Brosnan era. I think it does it all really successfully. The whole thing culminates in a boss battle of sorts in Blofeld's apartment. This environment is so well realized, with foot pedals to drop enemies into the piranha tank below, or I guess these are those particular kind of sleep-inducing non-lethal piranhas you hear so much about. Blofeld himself escapes into the next chapter, but he sends along Goldfinger's laser beam to take care of Bond, and this thing pretty much serves as the boss that needs to be destroyed in order to complete the level. And then the final level of the chapter sees you once again piloting Little Nelly and escaping from the erupting volcano before things wrap up with a debrief in M's office. The trio help Bond gain control of his real-life body for a few precious moments at a couple of points during the 2 chapters, and here we discover that Bond's body is rendezvousing with a former MI6 agent turned Spectre, Severina Morse. During Bond's exchange with Severina, mention is made of something called the Looking Glass, which I'm pretty sure is going to be this story's MacGuffin plot device creation. That is all that Bond can muster, though, before his brainwashed alter ego takes over his physical body, and the real James Bond personality is plunged back into the mind trap. Colour me intrigued, though. I'm actually quite into this story, and I'm looking forward to see it develop further. I'm sure that each chapter of the game will likely see Bond recovering more and more awareness of what his real-world body is doing, so alright, Cipher, you got me. Let's go on to chapter 3.
Oh, that sounds like a dismissal. I was rather looking forward to breakfast.
So yeah, obviously one of the major caveats of this being a free-to-play subscription service game is that you need to keep people coming back for more. Gotta keep them renewing that subscription on a monthly basis, so I assume that further chapters of the game will be released, a few weeks to a month at a time, and this will continue until the game is finished. And yeah, I mean, fair enough, I'd sooner that they do this than fill the game with in-app purchasing, and in all honesty, I think it's a testament to how much I was enjoying the game that I was so disappointed when I saw that end screen. I want to play more, and I want to see how this story plays out. Judging from the Atlantis artwork that appears, I assume that the next chapter will be The Spy Who Loved Me themed, which would be pretty incredible and highly suitable for this Cipher James Bond, because is it just me, or does this look a heck of a lot like Roger Moore? I think he's supposed to be an original creation. I mean, all the characters here are clearly based on a broad description of a cast member from the film series. I mean, the MI6 gang are clearly inspired by Judi Dench, Desmond Llewellyn, and Naomi Harris without actually looking exactly like them, presumably to get around likeness rights and so on. And yet, Bond looks so much like Roger Moore, I can't help but wonder if that's just accidental or not. And by the way, while we're on the subject, the game developers really nailed how Bond moves and acts in this game, from the swagger of the walk to the idle animations of him just doing his cufflinks and tie and and so on, I think he looks really great, but especially when he's armed with his, well, non-lethal weapons. Just how he carries them and how he shifts between holding them with one hand and two hands. It's just a really remarkable, like, there's so many little details in there that make this character feel so Bondian, and I think that that's a great achievement. I think that the environments are really well realized as well. I mean, taking just enough iconography and layout from the locations that they're including, but without them feeling like carbon copies of what you see in the films. There's clearly people working on this game that know the films very well, or at least they studied them very well in order to get some of these details, and it shows. I think it's a really well realized environment, and I also just absolutely love how towards the edge of levels there's this sort of black smoke ever present, just to remind you constantly that there is something off kilter about this whole thing, because, well, yeah, I mean, the reality that you're playing through all exists in Bond's head. So what's a Bond fan to do while he keenly awaits the dropping of further chapters? Why, replay the game to build up enough points to unlock and wear the Pierce Brosnan Cuba shirt from Die Another Day, of course! Yes, as you'd expect, there are a bunch of unlockables, the most fun of which, for me, being the different outfits you can unlock for Bond, and what a roster they have. The safari suit from Golden Gun, the gilet from For Your Eyes Only, the tactical outfit from No Time to Die, there's the ski suit from The World Is Not Enough, the Cuban shirt from Die Another Day, the white tuxedo from Goldfinger. Okay, the white tuxedo from, alright, yeah, sure, Spectre. You can replay levels on hard and challenge modes to unlock the cloth pieces you need to craft these outfits. Hard does what it says on the tin, and just as you play through the game with the difficulty increased, challenge mode is a bit more interesting, I think, and gives you specific tasks, such as completing levels in a certain amount of time, or collecting Spectre rings that are dotted around in order to succeed. In terms of replayability, I think that Cipher offers some strong options and rewards to keep you interested. There are also a variety of gadgets to unlock and enhance with your rewards, as well as suit linings, which can offer improvements to speed and stealth and so on, and the Moonraker fan in me looked to the sky and thanked the Hugo Drax that lives up there when the Moonraker laser, non-lethal of course, appeared as an unlockable weapon. There are some collectibles to unlock too, but I don't know if my game was just glitching or this is like a deliberately topsy-turvy move, but these descriptions do not match up with the object images. I guess this will likely be fixed in future with an update or something, but I was confused as heck when I read a Safin quote that was apparently being attributed to the Golden Gun. So that's my take on these first couple of Cipher chapters, my general first impressions of the game so far, and yeah, you know what? This thing well exceeded my expectations, and I am actually quite hooked to find out what's going to come next. And that is obviously no accident. As I say, these games work on the premise that they can keep players hooked to a particular subscription service, that they'll keep you coming back for more, but I'm fine with that. I mean, I think that they've spun a really interesting, quite unique 007 story here. They've presented some addictive gameplay with great incentives to improve and fun things to unlock, and the whole thing is packaged up with a really lovely, rewarding James Bond cinematic sheen. I will be eagerly anticipating the chapters to come, and I wonder, like, how long can this go on for? I can't imagine they'd adapt every Bond film for the game, but maybe they will if it proves popular enough. I mean, you know, maybe they'll just keep cherry-picking elements for a mashup, like they have done with these chapters, like throwing Trevelyan into the sets of Spectre and Skyfall, and Jaws into You Only Live Twice. I mean, previous Bond games have attempted to do this, and in my experience, few have succeeded in doing something great with the concept. If Cipher can keep going at the level it's at, I'll be considering it a triumph, and it is without a doubt the best Bond game we've had since 2010. Not that it has much competition, but still. Let me know your thoughts on Cipher below. Have you also played those first couple of chapters to completion just yet, or are you going to wait for further chapters to be released before you get into the game when you can have a more complete package to play? Also below, please do consider clicking the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button to stay super up to date on future video uploads, including future videos on Cipher. I'm going to be looking at every chapter of this game. There's also links to a variety of my social media pages, so please do follow me on those if you get to do so, and with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.